Welcome back to TTC. We've just started testing cordless angle grinders by making a dyno utilizing a super powerful amp flow motor that's used in battle bots. This allows us to measure things that aren't advertised on these tools, like their actual power and runtime on a battery. Basically though, so far we've covered Harbor Freight and cordless, comparing that to corded. So today we bought the latest models of your most requested 18 volt 4.5 to 5 inch angle grinders to go up against this Hercules, which is essentially 18 working volts as well, with some surprising results. We're just getting started here though. Please do leave your favorites down below so that we can buy those and add to our rankings. What we're curious about today is, while yes, Harbor Freight offers a cheap yet powerful option in this tool, can you spend less and still get at least that level of performance? Does spending much more deliver on that promise? And finally, since durability itself is always difficult to precisely quantify and score, by popular demand, we're also considering how does build quality result in felt vibration when we're talking about brands perhaps better known for their grinders. As we often point out, we're just one piece of this pie, a place where you can see these tools sort of measured against each other. We recommend looking at long-term reviews of these products as well. Okay, and up first, you've been looking at the latest brushless cordless angle grinder from Walmart's Hart brand. Yes, it does say 20 volt, but like the Hercules, as I'm sure you know, 18 and 20 volt max mean basically the same thing. A surprising number of our viewers want to see this model tested. And looking at the price, once you buy the recommended battery and charger that we have for it here, which is $224 total, I can understand why. That puts it under the Harbor Freight Hercules with just a comparable 5 amp hour battery. What is nice about this sort of package though is both the tool and especially with this battery, it's light, just 5.1 pounds, which will start it off with a smaller points deficit than most grinders we're looking at. For us around here, using these things just over our head on exhaust hangers and bolt studs, sometimes one-handed, that's a big bonus. And with this smaller size to boot, it can be valuable for us. But for you, if you're using this thing at waist height all day, maybe not as much. Our first test is speed. Advertised free speed is cool and all, but doesn't tell you much about the work this tool is going to be doing. Maybe that high RPM just easily bogs down. So we pull a 200 watt load, just over 1/4 horsepower on the tool to see what RPM it's most often working at for you. In this Hart's case, it's very good, 7,000 RPM. It's a very fast tool for sure. Under light loads like this, it's going to be moving more material than most. We're of course going to max this tool out and measure its vibration coming up, but we want to touch on Makita. This is their original LXT 18 volt line, of course. It's their latest generation of 4.5 to 5 inch grinders. It's offered in like 10 flavors between X-Lock versus non-X-Lock, paddle versus switch, AWS connectivity versus not. This is the regular switch style simply because that's what was in stock, and this costs about $287 as purchased if you include buying a battery and charger, so just about the same price as the best placing Hercules so far. But unlike Hercules, and this something you may know about Makita, they're famous for sort of stopping their battery development, which helps a bit here in the weight department, but also means no fancy 21700 cell packs available on this tool like even Harbor Freight has been offering now. But they do have a standard sized 6 amp hour battery for some more capacity available, so we finally picked up one of those, which we've been meaning to do really. Of course, XGT, their newer 40 volt line, might be the real source of beans from the brand, and we'll have to find out by buying one for sure. But the LXT platform, and these grinders in particular, are very abundant and popular for this brand known for their grinders. So let's check it out. We've so far not been too persuaded by using a identical size 6 amp hour battery here over the 5 amp hour in the past, because it means it should just have higher capacity but lower discharge amp cells inside. And check this out. This is a new 5 amp hour pack as well. We're seeing 5,860 RPM from the 5 amp hour battery. Not super high, but 6,350 RPM or so with the 6 amp hour battery under that same load. Might not sound shocking to you, but not what we expected to be seeing from the same number of 18650s inside this thing. Very cool and should help with that runtime as well, theoretically. All right, and last up for now, we have the Milwaukee 2888. Their latest 4.5 to 5 inch cordless angle grinder, and I think either the first or second most requested in the comments. Probably because we tested the corded Milwaukee in that episode and didn't even think to include the M18 like a bunch of boneheads. To buy this tool with a single 8 amp hour high output battery, which they include in their kits, and charger is about $389 at the time of filming, which makes this far and away the most expensive option so far by about $100. Made by the same folks, TTI, who make that Hart, but this tool alone is heavier due to in part using a larger size motor, and it does have speed adjustment like the Makita does as well. We'll talk about how odd speed adjustment is on grinders at the end of this video. But with its battery, the XC8.0 these come with, this guy tips the scales at a record 6.4 pounds, which is the highest so far in this 4.5 to 5 inch classic grinders. Unlike the Hart though, this has a speed brake when you let off like the Makita does, but just much faster, which can be nice, but hard to score that really. What's not hard to score is that this tool makes 6,260 RPM under medium to light load, the slowest of the bunch, but that may be because it's just geared to make more power. Let's find out. By ratcheting these load testers up in watts until the tool cuts out or drops below 4,000 RPM, which is like less than half their free speed, we can see just how much juice each one of these tools can muster. Here's some examples of what these power levels sort of look like. Peak power might not be the main deciding factor on these tools for you, but these brands sure like to say how much percentage more powerful it is than the last model, than other tools, without really telling you what that power level is, so that's something we can do for you here. The Makita LXT makes about 420 watts, then it cuts out. It doesn't have enough juice to move forward from there. The 6 amp hour pack on the same tool, that behaves similarly up to a higher level for doing so and makes it to 460 watts before cutting out. This matches the Hercules with a 5 amp hour, so okay. Comparable power between the two, and a sign that 21700 cells in an LXT could be making this much more power, maybe. The Milwaukee, as you might expect, or at least hope given their marketing that it matches an 11 amp corded grinder, makes more power. More power than all of these, and ratchets up the dials to 600, 650, 670 watts. So yes, it is powerful, a bit of a league of its own in this group. But we have more to discuss on this one, as we'll learn by taking a look at TTI's other creation, the Hart. The Hart, with all of its speed, is not easy to drag down in RPM like you would be trying to do by pushing down on this thing more and more with pressure. The Hart makes it through the 400s into the 500s and makes it to about 550 watts. That's massive. This is their standard 4 amp hour battery. A Makita and Hercules make 460 with this size of pack. Heck, the Hercules makes just 10 watts more with a 21700 cell 8 amp hour pack. And what we haven't shown you yet here is that Milwaukee, it makes the same exact RPM and power with a 6 amp hour high output battery, so that's good to know. Often we see the 6 amp hour doing better, but the 8 will give you the same for more runtime. That's good to see. But with the standard XC5.0, like you probably already own and might use swap on this tool, it makes less power than the Hart. Yes, obviously one tool is using the brand's recommended battery in this case and the other's not, but we're talking comparable packs and the Hart's coming out ahead. That's crazy. That's simply insane. Milwaukee even offering 21700 cell packs at all being the main difference here between the lowest cost and highest cost tools in this episode. We love finding those little discoveries. But runtime, yes, this is a deciding factor for a lot of you using or choosing not to use cordless grinders, and yet basically no brand advertises this. So we strap each tool to the load tester, throw the medium to light grinding task of 200 watts load on it, then run it till its battery's empty. But we'll cut to the chase here. That looks like this with RPM over time. With RPM factored, this will give you both an idea of run duration on a battery and like material removal from keeping up that disk speed during that runtime. So yeah, Hart dies first, unsurprisingly, but the Makita is not long behind with a 6 amp hour battery, just about 30 seconds more. And the next revelation is that the Milwaukee lasts for less time than the Hercules, both using 8 amp hour packs, and the Hercules maintaining a higher disk speed, so the Milwaukee is theoretically less efficient than the Harbor Freight tool from what we can measure. It's similar to the Hart's efficiency, about twice as long from twice the amp hours. The Makita is an odd one though. We found the 5 amp hour battery could last around 20 to 30 seconds longer than the 6. After consulting the Godfather Makita tools and stuff, he said this is basically commonplace now. 6 amp hour packs can cut out early, often even showing 2 bars still when quickly drained, so your mileage may vary. We'll score the tool with the pack it scores best with, but keep that in mind. Now, one thing the Makita does excel at, and showing our last testing here before ranking these tools, is vibration, or lack thereof in the Makita's case. We find you got to run these tools in a hand that's supported and with a disc on, which I imagine is how they are balanced. Otherwise, these readings are way off. For example, this Makita's vibration was cut in half when putting a 4.5-inch disc on it, whereas Milwaukee's increased quite a bit. And as you'll see here, the trend is this on either sides of disc. The Makita is stupid smooth. The Hart and Milwaukee, being made in the same place, have the same sort of vibration in both tools. And the Harbor Freight, yeah, time to pay the piper on this tool. That cheap power doesn't come for free. While you might not be using these tools all day like the corded grinders, you surely can feel and even hear the box of rocks that the Hercules is compared to the Makita. Now this is a measurable indication of comfort, harshness, build quality, and maybe even tool life in some cases that we're happy to add to our scoring here. Each tool's combined vibration in the form of meters per second acceleration is totaled here as a deficit, like the downside of weight is, in the form of -125, -59, -19, and -53. Huge difference here, which is part of what you're paying for, so will be included here, and these two very comparable. Their speed at working under some load becomes 62.6, 64.7, and 70 points. Now for how much power they make, often this is even the reason they come out with new models like the 2888, it's more power. They say an 11 amp corded level of that sort of power. Well, let's take a look at that. By dividing the watts in half on our new ranking chart for points, that's 335, 230, and 280 points. With the efficiency curves data that we have on this motor, we can back calculate that using the power they made and the RPM that they did so at, and that's 1.25 horsepower, 0.96 horsepower, and 1.13. That's about 930 watts out on this tool, not going in, but like actually out, or a 9.5 to 10 amp corded power based on the corded grinders we've tested so far. So maybe not quite 11 amp power we're talking here. Runtime is big for these tools, so the tools that were able to deliver that with their paired battery earn points here for that, but in some cases suffer here in weight and price, of course, too. That's 160 points for 16 minutes on the M18 here, with 83,000 RPM performed under that load in that amount of time, so basically the amount of work you would be doing on a battery. That's 42 points. Then for the LXT, that's 75 and 22 points, and 70 and 23 for the higher RPM Hart. When you consider all the factors as a function of price, that's 105.9 points for the Milwaukee, 88.7, and 128.7 for the Hart. The Hart's sort of a screamin' deal, which totals 518, 343.4, and 416.6, putting the M18 with its power-hungry motor but available 21700 cell packs to feed it in first place, followed by the remaining well-scoring Hercules, then Hart. The Makita, despite its smooth operation, those points advantages weren't enough to elevate this 18-volt model any higher. I'm excited to see what their XGT line might do, though assuming it's just as smooth. The biggest surprise, upset I feel here, is the Hart. It was included because it was cheaper than the Hercules from Harbor Freight, but it really showed up. What's going to blow your mind is if we put the M18 here with just an XE 5.0, this is the same tool tested with just a 5 amp hour pack. All these scores updated for that, 277.8 points for last place, which indicates to me that while this is in first place for now, I don't think it's going to stay here for long. It's good, but I think there's more impressive out there. Let us know what we should buy. Another thing that did not impress us really is speed adjustments in general on the Makita and the Milwaukee. It seems to us to just be like free speed adjustment. Once it's under load, adjusting the dial doesn't really do anything until you basically bring it down to a 1 or 2 setting on both tools. In fact, tools will still make, when pushed, the same peak power on low as in high, so I think it just stops free speed from being too high, or maybe slows the tool down when under really light use. Might be useful for lower RPM rated attachments maybe. Not sure, you tell us what you use it for. Now we shot all this a week or two ago, only now putting this data together, we see how freaking sweet that little Hart is for the money. The 6 amp hour Hart pack does exist, but costs more than the tool, which is hilarious, and why we originally didn't consider it for this, because it was our budget entry. So while our local Walmart doesn't have one, unfortunately, we now have this 6 amp hour Hart pack on order to include with our next grinder episode data. Appreciate you joining us for this. We're early on in this series, so forgive us if we haven't touched on your favorite models from the likes of Bosch, DeWalt, Metabo, and many others just yet. Thanks for watching.